Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dominic Grainger. I'm the CEO of Group M, EMEA, and the WPP Sports Practice. And today we're here to talk about, I'd say probably the most exciting, but I'm biased, and so far underutilized marketing space in the world, gaming, with also perhaps one of the most hyped new marketing spaces and a subdivision of gaming, esports. These are both huge topics, so we've only got 45 minutes, and we're going to pack in a lot into the conversation here. We want to look at gaming and its audiences, the opportunity for brands and how they can get involved, and things to look out for in the future. And to do that, we've got a fantastically knowledgeable, informed, and experienced panel with us here. So I'll start at this end, and I'll start with Poki, who's a hugely influential gamer, businesswoman, now an Amazon TV star as well, an all-round live streaming megastar, because I don't know what to say. Poki, anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
And next on the row, from game publishing giants Activision Blizzard, we have their Vice President and Head of Global Partnerships, Josh Cella.
Yep. Hello.
Next along, we have a Twitch Partnerships associate, I may have got that wrong, gamer, presenter, event host, interviewer.
Let's keep
and
it going.
Of course, therefore, an esports guru.
He does it all.
Sue Lee. Smix.
Nice.
And then on the end, we have Thomas Fellger, who's the CEO of a WPP company, IconMobile Group, which is also launching esports facilities this year in Berlin and New York. Welcome, Thomas. So we wanted to start off by talking a little bit about gaming and its audiences. And I'm going to start with you, Thomas, here. Can you just paint us a quick picture, I guess, of where esports fits into the wider gaming industry and what sets it apart?
I think it's the same in any sport, in a way. There's a lot of amateurs playing a sport. That doesn't mean they go every day to a stadium or watching the finals or something. I think esports is just the gaming into a competition, right? It's just really leading it into a competition where you're not by yourself, where you really share this, either by viewing it or playing it. And I think there's so many definitions about it, but for me it's really simple. It's really just taking gaming to the next level where you want to share your experience, your skills, or you watch others with their skills.
Yeah, so Josh, coming to you, esports has got a lot of very bullish hype over the last 18 months. And you could argue as well, there's some bearish commercial reality around as well, which has seen many teams and leagues struggling to turn a profit. So what do you think? Is esports a bubble set to burst or just figuring out how to develop?
We definitely do not see it as a bubble. At Activision Blizzard, we've built an entire division around this and invested a tremendous amount of our own resources and capital into building. Overwatch League is only in its second season. Call of Duty, we're rebooting next year to launch with a city-based franchised format like we have with Overwatch League. I'd say, any new business requires some early years of a lot of grit and hustle, but we definitely do not see any sort of bubble. In fact, I think our brand partners that have invested with us have recognized that being early movers and taken advantage of the fact that there hasn't been anything so structured has been hugely beneficial for them, and the viewership is amazing and just continues to get better and better. And as you had mentioned, as when you hold events and you have people that now have all these new events to come to and share their passion with others, we're seeing huge success with all of this experimentation on us with Overwatch League gradually moving to a home and away model. So every indication and every metric for us has been amazing, and our brand partners are all reaping the benefits of that. So
Okay, interesting. So Poki, you've successfully built a business now that obviously creates content, products, which gamers want to consume. Can you tell us a bit about your audience? I guess there may not be many people here from your audience, but tell us a bit about
Actually, sometimes you'd be surprised. So I'll speak specifically to my Twitch audience, which I have to say, for someone who's on so many different platforms, Twitch is always the most dedicated viewers, because these are not people that watch a 10-minute YouTube video once a week. These are people that watch you for hours every single day. And I imagine for brands, that's such a good group of people to tap into, because they're not people that are likely to turn away if you're doing some type of integration or sponsorship because they're already so connected to who you are and to what you say to them. And on top of that, obviously, if you're promoting something, they take your word so much more seriously than someone that they have a lot less exposure to on a weekly basis, let's say. On top of that, something that as I've started to do more variety on Twitch, meaning instead of just playing one game, I'll be in multiple different categories. Sometimes I'll even be streaming IRL, like in person, walking around. I've learned that depending on the category that I'm in, my audience will change as well. So for example, if I'm playing Fortnite, I know that the viewers in my chat will be skewed a lot younger. And I know if I'm playing something like League, the demographic is more like 18 to 25. And I found that actually when I'm doing just chatting or IRL and just talking to people, that's when there's, it tends to be a lot more viewership because just about anybody can watch. If someone follows me on Instagram, especially females, I think that's when I have the highest like female demographic. Maybe they aren't as in tune with like every single game that I play, so they can't watch the gameplay. But if I'm just sitting there talking about something, and I mean that could be a brand at some point, then I know they're happy to watch that. So, yeah.
And do you think with some of the gamers that they still suffer a bit from the sort of cliched stereotypes of being adolescents who kind of don't go out, or do you see a lot more? Do you see a broader audience now?
Oh, I think the audience is a lot broader. And I also think that sometimes the term gamers, people gatekeep it a bit much. To me, a gamer, it doesn't have to be someone that plays like 6 hours of a game like I do. It can be someone that plays Candy Crush on their commute home or something. Yep. I know a lot of girls that don't even consider themselves gamers because like the only game they play is like Sims, but they play like 10 hours of Sims every day. So it's like, yes, you're also a gamer. And I genuinely believe that anybody can be because to me, gaming is like, it's like reading or like watching TV. You don't like not watch TV, you just haven't found a show you like. So to me, it's like anybody can find a show that they like, yep. Just like anybody can find a game that they like.
Very good. So Sue, Twitch sits across the global gaming industry, covering recreational and competitive sectors. Can you talk to us a bit about some of the differences in the audiences and cultures around the world?
Yeah, I think actually Poki hit a lot of the notes as well. She talked about how depending on the game or category in which she's streaming in, the demographic of audience that she's catering to can differ wildly. And we see this on Twitch all the time. Let me just give some specific examples. When it comes to a game like PUBG, for example, it's extremely popular in Asia, but maybe not so much in North America. Games like Fortnite, however, are wildly explosively popular in North America, as we've seen over the past year, but maybe not so much in Asia. So depending on the demographic of viewer that you're trying to cater to, there are different games to be specifically involved with. And depending on the influencers that are big in that specific genre, you have a lot of options there.
Okay. And have you seen that developing fast over time?
No, for sure. I mean, if you look at even over the past 3 years, for example, even with Fortnite, I think that in the past 12 months, we've seen some people go from being almost nobodies to become overnight celebrities because of the explosion of the game. And we're seeing more and more brands really take advantage of that and have really long-standing partnerships with these guys because of the sort of celebrity status that they've achieved. So.
And Poki, how do you see esports compared with gaming? I mean, should we even think about esports as something completely different to regular gaming?
So the way that, the way that I see it is gaming and the gaming community is like this overarching umbrella, and then esports is kind of a niche sector of that. And I also want to specify that I think people can be very invested in esports and then not be over the course of certain seasons or months or whatever it is. So I feel like those things can be kind of interchangeable in a sense. On top of that, I particularly see Twitch kind of as a gateway to esports because a lot of people will come onto Twitch just because they like a certain content creator. They think they're funny, entertaining, educational, whatever it is. So they'll start watching their channel, but then anytime that there's an esports event in any category for any game, it's always the #1 channel. And so you might have been watching someone else, but as soon as that big event is happening, you're gonna go there. So I think it like funnels people from being general gaming fans to also being esports fans because you want to be up to date on what's happening, who wins, who loses. You want to be a part of those discussions. So yeah, I feel like it's a group part of it. So I wouldn't differentiate them too much.
That's where, sorry, that's where I think we see, if there are 2.1 billion people in the world playing games, and maybe 300-400 million that are esports fans of some sort. That funnel is sort of like there's not a huge challenge to overcome there. So it's like it's a very natural, as more and more esports entities start to exist and get introduced, and they're produced at a really high level. You have that fan base there that could very easily transition over.
Yeah. And I would say that gateway actually works both ways as well. For example, you have an event like the International, which is the biggest tournament that you have in a game called Dota 2. And that tournament has now become absolutely notorious because every single year they raise a prize pool that is so large. I believe last year it was over $20 million. I mean, that's such a large number that I feel like it becomes so hyped up because that's the one event that they have where they crown someone as the champion. And so this becomes talked about in the news. As you're leading up to the event, it's talked about all over the place, that when it actually happens, I oftentimes see people who may not have watched Twitch before, but they see their friends talking about it, so they tune in for the first time to see, okay, let me watch this thing that has, a $20 million plus prize pool involved. And then as they stop watching that tournament, they're like, oh, who's this Pokimane girl? Like, I haven't seen her before. Let me check out her content. And then they become fans and they start watching these UGCs as well. So.
Okay, so Josh, on that note, what do you think brands could really do more with esports? Where do you see that going?
So Activision Blizzard, we have a game partnership opportunities and we have esports partnership opportunities. I represent esports in particular, but I think in general, and I'm speaking for all of our divisions here, the fact that there's just such creative white space across the whole ecosystem, and we encourage brands to really push us and let's get creative together, because we just simply haven't had enough time to even scratch the surface on what the potential and the possibilities are. We've done a lot of research with our Season 1 Overwatch League sponsors, and the amount of brand lift. And we hired Nielsen, which is just one of the more reputable brands that many people are familiar with, especially in the U.S. And all of the research that came back from all of our Season 1 brand partners was just about 50% greater than the lift that they get in traditional sports. I sort of chalk that up to the fact that there was never any support for a lot of these communities. And now all of a sudden you have brands like Coca-Cola and T-Mobile and Toyota and others that are now supporting this structure and this passion point of millions of fans, and that never existed before. So they're getting this just ultra halo effect. And I think that's going to be in place for the foreseeable future. At some point, it'll level off. It'll be probably similar to the lift that you would get with traditional sports. But right now, there's really something special, and we show people the data, because obviously there's nothing better to show you than actual data. And then after that, it's more common sense. There's just a lot of opportunity.
I want to add on to that, although I'm not particularly an esports expert like you are, especially from a viewer standpoint and a content creator standpoint. I can also see how there's so much room for brands to come into these communities, especially first of their kind brands per se. For example, streetwear or athleisure, I don't feel has been capitalized in any particular way. Whereas if you were to say cellular companies in esports, I probably would think of something like a T-Mobile. I feel like there's a lot of small kind of industries that haven't been capitalized on at all. And if you are the first to do that and you do it in an organic and authentic way, that means so much to these gamers, because they really feel noticed, and it also adds credibility to our scene, which I know everyone appreciates a lot.
Yeah, there was a misconception that these fan bases didn't want it. And when I first got into the space 3.5 years ago, everybody was very gun-shy about investing. And it's actually been exactly the opposite. It's been, of course, you want to be organic, you want to add value, just like you would with any sort of media or sponsorship investment. But we have seen such an amazing return on that, and I think the brands are really benefiting from it.
Very good. So Thomas, coming to you, should we be encouraging brands to think about the gaming industry as a whole, rather than, we've talked here about esports, but how should we look at that?
Yeah, I mean, to get really involved. I mean, it's great to hear all the positives, right? But I see a lot of negatives also because a lot of brands burned a lot of money for nothing because they had no clue what to do and get advice by people who also don't understand really esports. It's a fashion label, right? You go in, you get a lot of contacts in that moment, and then suddenly you start something you're not even sure why. And I think with gaming and esports, it's the same thing. It's like you have to educate the brands about what media gaming means. And the best is always, I try with the brands we bring in is, we go to tournaments, we meet with some gamers, we go to some of the events, right? At least that they get a sense of it. Because we assume they know all these labels, esport, and they play Dota. Yeah, Dota. And what does it mean again? Is it something with an egg and a... No, it's not. It's like really, it's really tough to explain to a lot of people this. And so gaming for me is, like I said before, any other sport out there. You have an amateur sport, and if you want to reach people who love to spend time on these computer games, that's gaming for me. Do you want to get competitive with your brand, and you want to show that you are in a competitive environment, and you want to bet on the success of it or whatever? That's esports for me more. So it's depending on the brand, and depending on what your goal is over the future, what you want to achieve. And I think therefore you start to pick these little pockets and start slowly. I would start really slowly because I mean, of course, for some people that's not good. You want to have the budget right away. But I think the more you teach them and they see little success, the bigger the strategy will become, the bigger the funnel will come and the budget they put on to this. Yeah. We've seen this a lot of times actually right now.
And how have you seen it in particular with gaming versus esports? Different approach that works.
I mean, for gaming, it's really about, if people want to get really involved or brands in gaming, you definitely go to publishers, you go to big networks like Twitch, whatever, and figure out what can they do together to get a sense of all the different because gaming is not just playing computer, right? It's about where these people meet, some trends. You talk about fashion, whatever. There's a lot of things going on right now. And if you want to do esports, for example, the approach would be a totally different one. So and this could be wrong, but how we educate our clients, if you want to get really into competition in esports, then actually a team is a good level to start with because a team represents a lot of games, a lot of different channels, has by itself a lot of influencers already, right? If you take G2 or whatever, they have nearly 80 players, they all have millions of followers. So you can actually already get a sense of the scene by not betting on one title, on one influencer, one whatever. You actually bet on a broad spectrum of things.
Okay. And Josh, how can brands really get the best out of their gaming partnerships in the widest sense?
In the widest sense, well, we're actually seeing a pretty quick movement of. So initially, we had some sponsors that came in and they wanted to sponsor a league like the Call of Duty League or Overwatch League. But we're actually seeing in the past 2 years that movement is actually starting to increase the breadth where they want to include the game as well as the esports ecosystem. So whether that's Overwatch and then Overwatch League and Overwatch Amateur, or if it's Call of Duty and the Call of Duty. So that's where I think if you really, and it could be across the entire portfolio as well. So those opportunities will offer up a lot more creativity if you have the rights to the game as well as the esports. And then if you want to hedge your bets, we have $8 billion franchises across Activision Blizzard that are all popular in various parts of the world, as you had mentioned. If you're a company like Anheuser-Busch, it might make sense to evolve from just an Overwatch League partnership to maybe more of a portfolio opportunity, because then you could promote certain products in Korea and China and in Europe or the US. And so therefore our portfolio starts to match up well with a brand's portfolio like that.
And how have you found it with brands like that who've got a lot of experience in traditional sports, which are more mature from this point of view? How have you found, those sort of brands trying to get the most out of a new area like esports?
I think, to your point before, we're not going to just shoehorn anybody in. Obviously, people on the sales team might say, yeah, let's take the money. But our developers and the game teams that we work through to create any sort of platform are very particular. And they're not going to let us do anything that is a clunky execution. They want to make sure that it's done well. They want to make sure it's a great brand, it's done well, it adds value to the community and to the viewer. So we have a little bit of a check and balance in our internal system, in the fact that we just can't go and on the commercial side, pick something and then do it. We have to actually work with our development teams who care only about the game and the game community and what the ultimate product is. So that's a good thing for us. I'd say we're pretty picky and we can be at times hard to deal with. But at the end of the day, the executions have been great, and I think every one of our brand partners would agree that pushback that we gave to them on what their initial idea ended up resulting in a great execution that the community feels provides value.
And I mean, one of the things in this scenario which everybody underestimates is that there's a target group in front of you who's willing to share and participate, which they normally don't have. So a lot of the brands involved in this get actually surprised by that many reactions, and they're most of the time not even prepared for that. So they don't have the people, the staff to answer the questions to really do something about it. So that's also a big learning curve.
Yeah.
And Poki, earlier you mentioned the opportunity for certain brands to get more involved. What do you think the keys are for brands who want to create, obviously, authentic relationships with influencers like you and with other gamers more broadly?
Yeah, so as they mentioned, obviously there have been a lot of successful partnerships, but you can't just shoehorn any brand into any opportunity, right? And as an influencer, I gotta say, what I really want is for brands to really do their homework on who they're working with to the point that they feel comfortable enough to give that person creative control. Because that is so, so, so important. I really do think that in esports there are incredible traditional marketing opportunities. But with an influencer, I don't really want to sit there and deliver 3 pre-rehearsed lines. It's not really organic. I know there's certain keywords brands want to hit, but let me say it my way, a way that my viewers will enjoy. It's going to be a win-win for me because I feel like I'm being authentic, and it's going to be a win for the brand because my viewers are going to enjoy it more. They're going to attribute that enjoyment to your brand and be a lot more likely to support whatever partnership this is, right? So I think that's the number one thing. Either the brand being able to give that creative control or having someone working for the brand that is an industry expert in sorts. I don't mean someone who necessarily needs like research for 10 years, but just someone who understands the scene, understands what gamers think is cringy or isn't going to work, and understands what can work, and having them come up with the idea as opposed to just strict guidelines.
Yeah. And how have you found that? Have you found that brands, in your personal experience, have been willing to give you creative control, or how long has it taken them to get relaxed about that? Or
honestly, it differs from brand to brand. And I've worked with people from across all the spectrum, and I gotta tell you, from especially my viewers, like nothing feels better as an influencer than to do a partnership with a brand you love and have your viewers enjoy it as well. That's really, really incredible. And I think it's fine to expect like a bit of like feedback and leeway, as long as I'm given the opportunity to pitch my ideas, which is something that I love to do, and get a bit of feedback, and we can come to a compromise. That's totally fine, as opposed to being told like this is how you need to do it every single time, because just being completely frank, the brand isn't going to get as much return on their investment if I do that.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be authentic, clearly. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Sue, how do you think advances in the actual gaming technology will change the way brands can market to gamers as well?
So I think one thing that makes Twitch stand out in this specific space is that Twitch is all about live as well as interaction with chat. And so what I mean by that is I feel like a lot of times, historically at least, when it came to brands trying to think of different advertising opportunities, it was done in a very sort of static, traditional way. But with the advances that we've been making on a live platform, you can really make that much more interactive so that chat can actually take part, and it can be an enjoyable experience where they're not just sitting there for 30 seconds, a minute, watching some pre-roll or mid-roll that's predetermined, but they can actually be part of it themselves. So we've had some campaigns that have happened on Twitch. One that I can think of straight off the bat is we did an Old Spice campaign where a guy was literally put in the forest, and chat would give directions and prompts and tell them where to go. I mean, chat just loves things like that, where they get to have a say as to what happens.
Yep.
So really, as more and more technological advances happen, the ways in which brands can really integrate and have that live interaction with chat is only going to get better and better. And I really encourage brands to really think outside the box and think about how they can do that. Because as soon as you can get your audience to engage with you in that active way, that's already a step beyond a passive viewer watching a 30-second ad they don't want to watch.
Absolutely. Good. And we've seen, quite a lot of games rise and fall in popularity relatively quickly. Even Fortnite is leveling out a little bit. And how can brands navigate that sort of inherent volatility in this sector, as new titles and platforms are released?
So I'm going to speak from the influencer standpoint because I primarily work with partners like Pokimane. I think that there's a few things to pay attention to here. I think that something really dangerous to do is to put all your eggs in one basket, whether it's the Fortnite basket or the Apex Legends basket or PUBG basket. I think that what I've noticed, especially over the last 5 years, is that there are going to be influencers that are not just popular because they get a lot of viewership, but they are popular and they retain that viewership no matter what they're streaming in. And that is a very, very powerful thing. So what I mean by this is there might be someone who is phenomenal at League of Legends, but that is a very, very specific niche game. And this same streamer, while he might get 20,000 viewers playing that game, may lose that viewership if he starts to play something else because, God forbid, one day he just wants to play something else. That being said, someone like Poki actually retains her viewership no matter what she streams. Whether she's sitting there just hanging out, talking to her community, whether she's playing Fortnite, whether she's out, walking in France, on the streets of France, just showing everybody what she's doing throughout the day. That is a very, very powerful thing, and I encourage brands to pay attention to not just viewership, but people who are able to retain that viewership across categories, because that is where you're going to find that influencers have communities that are dedicated to them and not necessarily the skill level or that specific game that they're a part of.
And you must have thought about that, Poki, about how you develop, as time goes by and where you go and where you take your audience, I guess.
What she's speaking to is something that isn't very intuitive to someone that is looking at gaming or Twitch from an outside's perspective. So sometimes you'll go to a channel and you'll just see a number, like a live concurrent viewership, and be like, I guess this is how popular this person is or how much reach this person has. And I don't think that's quite the case. I think there's like a core percentage viewership, and then I call it kind of like a fluff viewership, which comes and goes depending on the category that you're in. And that's where I think brands need to do their research on someone and see how do they perform in different categories. Like, what is the amount of community that they actually have that follows them regardless of whether they of where they go, because those are the people that will listen to what they say in regards to a brand or a sponsorship. And also that's very important for ROI, because I mean, if you expect them to have 20,000 viewers because you saw that in one game and then you pay them to play a different game, it's very, very different. It's definitely not something that you can see when just looking at a channel. You really have to dig deep, see how they do in other games. Yeah.
But you and your team have access to all that data, I guess. So that's something that brands can get to understand.
Yeah, I think so. But I would also say it's probably easiest to just observe as opposed to specifically ask either that person or their manager. It's definitely something that a lot of websites have tools that they're building out for that tracks how somebody does in different categories. So it's all really interesting and definitely things that you guys can look into.
So Josh, what can rights owners do to make gaming more accessible for brands?
This is related a bit to what I was talking about a second ago, and the fact that we've noticed more and more brands that have wanted to have a partnership not just with the game but also with the esport. That's been the case with Coca-Cola, and a lot of our other conversations are sort of evolving into that type of model. I think that allows them to do all types of activations, but as I said, only a couple of years in here, and I think that we haven't scratched the surface on that. Coca-Cola is going to be really thoughtful on how they take that to market and utilize the rights that they have to Overwatch the game and then Overwatch Esports. But I think with the expertise that brands bring to the table and their experience in working with traditional sports and their just overall creativity and pushing us as an industry to try new things, I think there's just a world of opportunity there. But I'd be lying if I said that there's a perfect example for us to point to. We do have BlizzCon, which is an amazing 2-day event that Blizzard holds with 30,000 people and huge fans of Blizzard, of all things that Blizzard creates, all of our games, and they come and they experience beta models of games, and they see get to see new releases and new information. So that's a good example, but that's a 2-day event. I think at all of our esports events that we are creating throughout the year, which are call it like 8 or 9 months long of a season, there are more opportunities to use those events that are esports in nature, but to also bring gaming content and new game formats to those fans.
Although this isn't entirely related, kind of relates to the overarching point of as much as there's a lot to say about taking it slow, being methodical in what you do, baby steps, not just forcing yourself to do something, I do also want to add that I think if you can come up with an organic, exciting idea, I say go hard, because when you make a splash in the scene, it's not a one-time thing. This is a scene that talks, and we talk a lot, but in a good way. When something good happens, everyone will hear about it. If you do a really dope commercial with influencers that are known, it'll be everywhere, especially if it's funny, especially if it's memey. There's a lot of things that kind of need translating to understand the gaming scene, but if you do it well, I say do it big, and everyone will hear about it.
And this is not what I said. This is not the opposite what I said, I think. But before you can do this, you need to get a little bit of sense of what this is, because most of the marketing people we're talking to, they literally have no definition of any word you just said.
Yeah, that's
a problem. How do you want to do big if you, right? And then big is, let's do a video shoot out on the beach with beautiful dolphins jumping around and put a computer on top of them.
It's not traditional. You almost need a gaming translator to tell you this kind of stuff works with this audience. It's really not something that I think you can just observe. You have to be deep in it. Yeah. And influencers typically are. So I think we are great people to tell you, don't do this. This is going to be cringy, or do this. People are actually going to enjoy it.
I think you just started a consulting business.
Yeah. Oh, that's very compelling.
Why not?
Exactly. Look, on a very different note, I wanted to ask you, Poki, but Sue, you may have a point of view on this as well. Whether gaming and esports has a sort of gender equality issue or not, either at elite level or in the audience and behavior. And do you see that?
So I don't really like to look at it as an issue. Because we have we've made some incredible strides over the years, and honestly, every year it gets better and better. But also, I do know that it has changed a lot, especially over the last 10 years. I know growing up, I didn't know a lot of other girls that played games. I didn't really talk about games with other girls. It wasn't as culturally accepted, but now it's way more normalized. I have tons of, especially in Fortnite, so many cute little girl fans, ones that want to grow up to be esports professionals. So I can tell that the future is bright, especially for the next 10 years. And just to continue, especially having visibility for women in gaming. The more you include them in those sponsorships, in those videos, in those everythings, not only are we pushing the people that are already in gaming, but I think it allows for girls that don't consider themselves gamers but do enjoy games, it makes them more comfortable to consider themselves a part of that community, which is overall better for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it was just almost a cultural thing at a certain point, and to really just give a quick example, when I was younger, my own brother thought it was really bizarre that I wanted to watch esports competitions. He told me it was freaky, and he told me to close my laptop, and I told him that he was the one that got me into this, and he told me it was still weird. And this same brother is now super proud of me when he sees me hosting these million concurrent viewership competitions. Now he's super proud of me. He posts about me all the time, and sometimes I like to give him crap for it and just say, hey, you were the one that told me this was really weird. Had I listened to you, this wouldn't have happened. So, I mean, just the shift there is dramatic, and even when it comes to the reception that I've received, back in 2011 when I first started doing all of this, I had some of my girlfriends from high school, college reach out and say, what is that? And I could tell there was a judgmental tone there, what do you, like, you're doing something in gaming? And there was a little bit of a tone there. But now, these same girls and more are reaching out saying, hey, I think this is so cool what you're doing. I have, friends reaching out asking if I know you, and this is so cool, blah, 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 blah. So I think just there inherently, there's been a massive shift. And I think what Imane just said earlier is totally correct. The more that there is visibility, whether it's in the esports space where, when I first started, I was the only female on the broadcast for years. And I got very used to that. And I stopped thinking about it and I stopped expecting it because it just wasn't happening. A month ago, I was on a broadcast with 3 other females, and I got actually really emotional. I didn't think that was a thing that would happen so fast, but it was a major esports tournament where there were 3 other females there, not as placeholders, not just because they were trying to add diversity, but they deserved to be there because they knew what they were talking about. So I was really emotional about that. So it's fantastic to see that it's happening in esports, it's happening in gaming because of influencers like Imane, so we're really making a lot of progress.
I want
That's
to add
great.
one other thing.
Well said.
Yeah, you go. I also want to say, I've been in the gaming scene for a very long time as a content creator and just as someone who loves games. And I have to say, I feel like one of the biggest shifts or impacts that I've seen happen came from Fortnite, and specifically Fortnite trying very, very hard to take their game mainstream and not just try to make it popular among gamers, but popular among anyone. And I think that that's something that brands can also facilitate for any gamer, any developer too. When you try to come up with these ideas or integrations or partnerships that are on a really wide scale and that bring a lot of eyeballs in, like when you include celebrities that also enjoy gaming, or people that are maybe not conventional gamers, and kind of mesh this in a very enjoyable and organic way, that does wonders for the scene. I think those are really the type of things that that really give visibility to women and make it a whole lot more of an inclusive space.
Absolutely. Virtuous circle. I mean, just building on that last point about making things more accessible, Thomas, I wanted to just come back for the last point on, what should brands do right now to take advantage of the opportunities in the wider gaming sector?
I mean, first of all, I think they have to acknowledge that this is not just a fashionable thing. This is something now, of course, esports and gaming is talked for a while, but I think the last years really changed a lot. The money put into this, the acknowledgement of traditional channels to accept the fact that they have to somehow broadcast these things, right, from traditional sports channels to whatever. Everything really leads to now, this is now a basis to really build on top of it. It's still the beginning, I believe that too, but it's shown now, the professionalism behind it is changed dramatically. Now people from professional sports, whatever organization joining, helping to organize it, because it was a little bit Wild West. And I think what you as a brand have to understand now, this target group is there. It grows with you. It will not go away. It's not just young people. They grow with you, right? We're talking about already people up to 40 years old because they grew up with gaming and whatever. They have, they have also their kids growing up with it, and now they have something to bond. Like you go to a, football game or whatever, you're now going to these esports events. If you go, for example, to esports events, you see a lot of parents with their kids coming in, right? It's like it's not just kids or young people. It's a lot of different people. So I think brands have to understand they need to formalize an opinion about this target group. They have to formalize a strategy about how to make this part of their communication. And I think what's really interesting is with this new target group is that the potential, how you reach out to them and what you can do with them is so much more than the traditional. So we mentioned a lot of things. Hire maybe people from outside who can help you inside to change it, because the strict kind of organization you see in traditional companies doesn't really support the channel. So I think you have to rethink about your marketing department and how R&D and our product design is actually working together. And so yeah, as a brand, get involved now. If you want to do something big, then please know what you do big and know what you're talking about. And don't try to pretend, because a lot of brands pretend they know what's going on. They don't know. So being honest about it and pick the right partnerships. It doesn't matter, team, influencer, Twitch, whatever. There's a lot of channels out there. And I think the mix of it will make it successful.
Very good. So look, we're pretty much at the end. I just wanted to wrap up. I think some quite interesting observations from my point of view, because clearly, and this may seem obvious, but I think we're saying that what we're hearing is that brands and companies need to treat this very differently from traditional marketing, traditional sports, whatever. And I think actually it's very interesting for me hearing not only from Josh, but from Sue and Poki about, if you spend a bit of time with people who are actually in this sector, we've got an influencer here and really understand what drives their audience. I think there's some what may seem like very simple learnings here today, which sound pretty powerful to me. I think you could be a consultant straight away, threatening us already.
Hit me up.
But I think it is really important to be sensitive to what's different about this environment from a traditional marketing environment. But either way, I think we can all sense big potential here, lots of opportunity, and hopefully we can all work together in some way to realize that opportunity. So I'd like to thank, first of all, Poki, Josh, Sue, and Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you.